Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of How to Draw Comics. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to draw a group shot and a crowd scene, and I think this video is really interesting, and I don't want to make the intro too long, so if you like what you see, as always, subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share my video, and if you want to see more of my art, please go to Instagram at Sedat or my Facebook, which is at Sedat Art. Thank you guys for tuning in, and now off to the video. Alright, so the first thing I am doing is that I'm setting up the perspective grid, and I'm tilting the 1 point perspective here a little bit to make the whole thing look a little bit more dynamic, because if you have a straight on 1 point perspective it can tend to look a little bit boring, and I'm creating this pattern in order to make sure that everything is correct, and then I'm drawing the horizon line, obviously, and I'm starting to block in the first layouts for the characters, and I'm trying to arrange them so that everything will look pleasing but won't be distracting from what I am actually planning to do with this piece here. And as you can see, I have already started drawing a few characters, and some are closer to the camera and some are a little bit further away, but the focus of the drawing won't be on the characters. The characters merely just appear as a means to add another degree of realism or believability, if that's a word, to the illustration here. And since I am now done with the layout for the characters, I'm starting to block in some background elements, such as buildings and building signs, or neon lights, whatever you want to call them. And this is obviously going to be something like a cyberpunk kind of scenario, where I am having a lot of neon lights and signs hanging and a lot of buildings, and in those terms it makes sense to have a lot of characters, because when we think of something like cyberpunk, we always think of crowds of people, similar to what we saw in Blade Runner, and that's what I'm trying to convey here. And now I am starting to draw the main focus of the character. That's going to be a character in the background, actually, that's jumping from one building to another. And as you will see in the final version of the drawing, despite the fact that there are so many characters in front of the drawing, or in the front of, or in front of the camera, we will still be focusing our attention towards the character that's jumping from one building to another, simply because I've arranged the characters so that they are not going to distract us from the focus of the drawing. And as you can see, I've already started sketching in some details into the characters. And what I did here was to put a silhouette into the front, and then I am starting to sketch in some details into the face of the other characters. But the fact that I placed those characters to one to the very left and one to the very right, and have none of those characters look straight into the camera, they will not be distracting us or the viewer in general from the focus of the drawing, which, as I mentioned before, is the guy jumping from one building to another. And later on you will understand why I'm doing that, because, or how I'm even how I'm emphasizing that even more. It's something very easy, but sometimes the easiest things can become a little bit harder. And as you can see, I am adding more details to the other characters in the background too. And what's always important to me is that those characters don't look average or kind of typical, and they could look, or they would look like people that you may meet on a street in a bigger city or something like that. And all of them are supposed to be unique and individual, but still, you know, not too detailed and not too, too distracting for the viewer. So I am not adding the most details here. I am just basically giving them enough details and information, or adding enough details and information so that the viewer could, recognize them as normal people or as people on the street, but without distracting him too much. And yeah, and now I am finished with the characters, and I'm starting to basically draw the background buildings. And as you can see, it's, almost, finished basically, because the thumbnail or the layout basically had all the information that was needed in order to you know to bring along the idea that I was having in my mind. But still, if you want to show this drawing as a finished illustration, you obviously will be needing a certain degree of details in order to make it, look real or believable. It should have, something of a finished illustration look, and therefore I am adding the, right amount of details into the or onto the drawing in order to make sure that it looks, believable and realistic without being too distracting, and without, taking away from the focus of the or from the main idea of the drawing, and which is basically just that despite the fact that there are so many people on the street, this, vigilante or whatever the guy is who's jumping from one building to another will, go unnoticed. And trying to make these, buildings look futuristic, but still, they could be from this world, and they aren't too off from what we know from, science fiction movies and cyberpunk movies. And, I'm just adding the right amount of details in there in order to make sure that we will have everything we need without overloading the picture, because it's very important if you have your main character in the background that he doesn't get lost. And now what I'm doing is that I am basically adding gray tones to the drawing, because if you think about a crowd shot, you could also think of layers of black or gray that are placed after each other. For example, the closest character is all black, and the other two characters that are behind him are in dark gray, and then the others have lighter gray, and those in the background are in very light gray. And since I'm finished with this one, I am heading towards the second drawing. You will see that I was struggling quite a bit with this one. Here I am just using a front view with the 1 point perspective, and this is going to be a little bit interesting because you are going to see me struggling quite a bit here. And it's starting right away because I had this idea in my head of characters standing there and looking quite a bit exhausted, but it at first it didn't really work. But later on, once I got the first 2 or 3 characters down, I it went easier then, and yeah, and I'm still struggling here, not happy with how this is turning out, because the pose that I gave this character didn't work. And now this is the, the breaking point. This is the point where the illustration started to work in, in the way that I had imagined it, as you can see. And this is something that I will, that I will follow up with in one of the next videos, is the body language of the character. As you can see, the guy that is standing has a very proud and, very royal sort of pose, while the other guy is, you know, bowing in front of him, basically submitting himself to him. And it's going to be interesting how this is going to turn out, because when I'm adding the other characters, this whole thing will become a little bit more interesting and tell a story with only one picture. And but that's going to be, still a little bit, because I was quite struggling here with the other characters. And yeah, and then now I am adding another character, and as you will see, this character and the other characters look a little bit, or will look a little bit different in terms of their body language here, because they are going to show a certain degree of disdain or resentment, and it won't be quite sure why, but there could be many ideas there. But later, more about that when I am, laying out the next batch of characters. But what's important here with the group shot is that you always want to create the illusion of space and the illusion of them standing in the same, you know, space basically. And I have this one guy who looks like a very strong guy, standing very close to the camera, close to those rocks that are there. And I'm trying to figure out how I could, make the other characters next to the, king or lord or whatever he is, um, look like, because they are supposed to be not happy, although they have obviously won a battle and the enemy is bowing in front of them. They are supposed to show some kind of, as I mentioned before, disdain or resentment. And it will become clearer with, with the details when I'm adding those. And now I am adding the, next bunch of characters in there that are supposed to be, part of the group, of the guy that is submitting himself to the overlord, king, duke, whatever he is. And what I wanted to convey with these characters, as you will, see when I am fleshing them out a little bit more, is that they are defeated, they have lost, they are also lost. And I think it shows the best with this character that I'm drawing right now, because he's going to look like he's, screaming into, or into the sky, basically asking God, why did it had to happen? And despite the fact that this is a group shot, I tried to, align the characters so that they look very cool. Some keep a certain degree of distance, and you can very clearly in this drawing already, in this stage, distinguish between the characters that are part of the winning team and the ones that are on the losing side. And this is only because of the body language that I built into these characters. And I think, if you look at the drawing, you can clearly see that this as a group shot is already working, despite the fact that this is just, still the rough layout phase. And here I am adding some stuff to the background. And now I am starting with, adding the details, basically, just doing the fine lines of the drawing. And yeah, and I think, the drawing looks great already, and I'm very pleased with it. It's actually one of my favorite ones that I have drawn in a while. And I am now basically just adding somewhat details to the characters in order to make the whole thing a little bit more uh, clearer and cleaner, and you will be able to see, you know, clearly which characters are on the side of the king and which ones are on the losing side, just because of the uniforms that I am adding to those characters. And as you can already see with this, very strong and muscular looking guy, he looks to the loser of the battle with a certain degree of, you can't clearly tell if it's disdain or if it's disgust or maybe even pity. And the king, he looks very, full of himself. He's pleased, his chest is out, and in order to make him look even more, quote unquote kingly, I am adding this fur onto his back. He's one of the few characters that has no beard. His armor looks very clean, so you know we can imagine that he didn't even participate in the fight himself. He let his people fight for him, and he's now here in order to, humiliate his enemies. And you know, there's his enemy, and he looks way more roughed up. His hair is dirty. His beard doesn't look very clean, and he's on his knees, basically looking like someone who's either praying or standing in front of someone who's clearly above him, who's clearly you know the winner. And it looks like he's kissing the ground, or he has no he's defeated. And this guy here, for example, if you look at him, he's the defeat didn't destroy him, but the fact that he's seeing his friend or his leader or his king bowing to this other guy who's full of himself breaks him. And he's you can clearly see from the posture, or from the body language, that he's kind of broken. Although he's standing, his pose makes clear that he's broken. His back is tilted to the front, and his head is down. And for example, this guy here with who's standing behind him looks like he's ready to chop off some heads if they misbehave. His pose is completely different. He looks a little bit more relaxed, but he's still ready. He has the sword on the ground, but could basically start fighting at every moment. And here I have these guys that look kind of they are not happy, they are not pleased. And I was thinking maybe the guys that are submitting themselves, maybe they are traitors, people who fought alongside the king at some point, and then betrayed the king or rebelled against him. And despite the fact that they fought against the king, these guys are not happy with the treatment that they are receiving from the king. And the fact that everyone is standing behind the king is why he's the only one who looks very happy and pleased, because these guys, they are not happy with what's going on, and they can show it in front of him. But if they stand behind him, they are maybe able, through their body language, to show that they are not pleased. And yeah, and with these guys that have basically lost the battle, I think there's only one guy who's still got a shirt on, but the other ones were stripped off, or stripped naked, basically just kept their pants. And we know this from history that Caesars and kings would do that to their enemies in order to humiliate them in front of their own people. And in the background we see some other guys who are also on the side of the king who's won the battle, maybe some sort of priests. And unlike the warriors, they look kind of happy or pleased, and they because maybe they didn't share camaraderie with these guys, and this guy, he's broken, he's yelling at the sky, and maybe asking God why this had happened to them. And his language, or his body language, speaks a clear and very you know a very clear language in which he shows that he's broken. And he isn't broken because he has lost the war, but he's broken because he sees his king kissing the ground. He would have rather died instead of seeing it. And yeah, and we can clearly see, despite the fact that there are so many characters here in this group shot, that who belongs to who, who's on which side. And just by you know placing the characters so that we can make a distinction between the winning and the losing side. And this guy here, he looks like he's ready to rumble just in case any of these guys dares to stand up and attack the king. And yeah, and the same goes for the other characters that I am going to be drawing into the background here, or behind the king. They are not happy, they don't like what happened. It's similar to what's think of it like Game of Thrones. If they had to obey what King Joffrey had to say. If you don't know who that is, then I'm sorry for you, you missed a great show. And yeah, and now I'm done with the characters, and I'm adding just a few lines for the background, because we don't want to make the background too distracting. And since there are this many characters, I decided that I would add the gray tones just to the elements of the back and foreground. And I think it looks quite good so far. And as you can see, I am using a darker gray for the stones, because I wanted to make sure that we can clearly distinguish them from the rest of the background and foreground. And I am adding a lighter gray to the grass, just so that we have this idea, or this idea basically of the ground being grass or something like that. And yeah, and the picture is almost finished, and the video is also almost finished. I hope you guys liked what you see here, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you guys liked the video, please subscribe, like, comment, and share my video. Also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. My Instagram is @SedatOzgen, should be somewhere up here, and my Facebook is @SedatOzgenArt. Thank you guys for tuning in, and see you soon. Bye bye.